Welcome back to Superbly Said, Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases, and a quick shout out to SpeakDuo.com, where you can meet people from around the world on video calls to practice and become more confident with your English speaking abilities.
Today we are looking at a SpeakDuo lesson plan and presentation deck titled 10 Things That Would Make You a Witch in the Middle Ages, which uses historical themes to teach advanced English vocabulary to language learners.
Right, and the core concept of utilizing medieval true crime and societal paranoia to teach advanced English idioms is incredibly engaging, yet the execution creates severe barriers to entry before the learner even reaches the material.
Yeah, to evaluate those barriers, we really have to start at the reader's literal point of entry.
So, when a language learner opens this deck, they see this incredibly compelling title page promising witch trials and dark history.
Oh, for sure, it's a great hook.
It is, but then the immediate follow-up just breaks that spell entirely. Pages 2, 3, and 4 dive straight into, highly technical app promotions.
Right.
We see a pitch for a 7-day free trial of SpeakDuo Pro, breakdowns of AI feedback for grammar, and even a super specific correction on how to pronounce the word yeah.
Which is, quite a pivot.
Yeah, they tell the user to start with a light Y sound and finish with a soft sound. And all of this administrative onboarding happens long before the first vocabulary word is introduced.
Exactly.
But I want to play devil's advocate for a second here. Isn't this just the reality of business materials? I mean, it's kind of like a movie theater playing commercials and trailers before the feature presentation, right?
I see what you mean, yeah.
Perhaps they feel they have to front-load the business value before the learner gets totally distracted by the fun witch trivia.
The placement of administrative app promotions and generic feedback features at the very beginning of the document disrupts the educational flow and severely dilutes the core thematic hook.
Gotcha. So it's just too much up front.
Yeah, the main weakness here is that front-loading unrelated technical advice completely stalls the momentum of the actual premise.
Right.
The reader signs up for this engaging historical journey, but instead, they're immediately hit with dense, uncontextualized instructions about forming complete sentences.
It feels like homework right out of the gate.
Exactly. When you ask an adult language learner to process subscription models and pronunciation mechanics before they've even warmed up, you just deplete their cognitive reserves.
So how do they fix that without losing the business side of things?
Restructure the document to separate the business and administrative content from the thematic lesson, allowing the historical hook to drive the initial reader engagement.
Okay, but what does that actually look like? Give me a concrete example.
Well, there are a few paths. The easiest way is to just move the AI feedback examples and the free trial info to a dedicated appendix at the very end of the lesson.
Oh, so let them experience the value first.
Right. Or, if marketing insists it has to be visible earlier, the creator could integrate those promotions into a minimal footer on each page.
That makes sense.
And if they really want to be clever, they could playfully weave the app features into the theme itself, like introducing the grammar check by saying, "Don't let bad grammar make you a scapegoat at work. Use our AI."
Oh, I like that. It keeps the spooky tone.
Exactly.
Okay, but let's say a learner pushes through that admin stuff and gets to the actual vocabulary.
Let's look at the phrases they chose.
Yeah, because the phrases themselves are great for advanced learners. Things like to hit reset or to watch someone like a hawk.
Before we critique the structure, we should actually break down some of these phrases for our listeners, right? Because they are quite nuanced.
Yeah, let's do that. So the first one they introduce is to hit reset.
Which basically means to completely wipe out a current situation and start fresh.
Right. Like, how is that different from just saying start from scratch?
Good question. I'd say start from scratch implies building from nothing, whereas hit reset really implies stopping a current failing process, like pushing a button to erase what just happened.
Ah, okay. So in a work context, you might say to your colleagues, our current marketing strategy is failing, so we need to hit reset and brainstorm new ideas.
Perfect example. Or if you're answering an IELTS Speaking Part 2 question about a big life change, you could say, moving to a new city allowed me to hit reset on my life.
Nice. Okay. What about to watch someone like a hawk?
That one means to observe someone very closely and with intense suspicion, waiting for them to make a mistake.
So it's way more intense than just keeping an eye on someone.
Way more. Keeping an eye on can be protective or casual, But watching like a hawk is predatory. Like, ever since I messed up that report, my boss has been watching me like a hawk.
That's stressful. What about a scapegoat? That's a great historical one.
Yeah, a scapegoat is a specific person unfairly blamed for the problems of others, usually to deflect from the real causes.
Kind of like a fall guy?
Similar, but fall guy sounds a bit more like a criminal conspiracy, Scapegoat is broader. Like at work, when the project failed, the newest team member was made the scapegoat.
Right. And then there's to raise eyebrows.
Which means to cause surprise, suspicion, or disapproval.
So not the same as turning heads?
No. Turning heads is usually positive, like getting attention because you look great. Raising eyebrows has that hint of judgment, like his decision to take a 3-month vacation really raised eyebrows at the office.
Definitely. They also cover a lose-lose situation.
Right, a highly difficult scenario where every possible outcome is bad. You end up worse off whatever you pick.
Sort of like a catch-22?
A bit, but a catch-22 is more about a paradoxical rule. A lose-lose situation is just bad options. Like, if I complain about the heavy workload, I look lazy. But if I stay quiet, I burn out. It's a lose-lose situation.
Makes sense. Let's run through the last few quickly. To stand out?
To be noticeably different from everyone else in a way that draws attention.
Contrast that with sticking out like a sore thumb.
Standing out can be a good thing. Like, her excellent presentation really stood out. Sticking out like a sore thumb is always awkward.
Got it. And to keep something to yourself?
To deliberately not share specific information, actively choosing to stay silent.
As opposed to biting your tongue?
Right. Biting your tongue is stopping yourself from saying something specific in the moment. Keeping something to yourself is an ongoing state of privacy. Like, for IELTS, I prefer to keep my political views to myself.
And the last one is to be doomed.
To be in a situation where failure or a terrible outcome is completely inevitable.
It sounds so much more emotional than just saying something is destined to fail.
It really does. Like, without proper funding, the new business venture was doomed from the start.
Okay, so the vocabulary itself is incredibly strong and useful.
It is.
But looking back at the lesson deck, how are they actually teaching these? Because they give a historical context sentence about witches and then a modern practice question for each.
Right.
To me, it feels a bit like ordering a cookbook titled 10 Ways to Cook a Steak, but receiving a glossary of kitchen utensils where the examples just happen to mention steak.
That is a perfect analogy.
Like the user's definitely learning the utensils, the idioms, but they aren't getting the list of 10 things they signed up for.
The document's execution leans so heavily into vocabulary definitions that it inadvertently abandons the specific historical premise promised by the title.
So the promise of the title is just broken.
Yeah, the weakness here is that the actual list of things, like having a nightmare or possessing a birthmark, is completely buried inside passing example sentences for the idioms.
Right, I noticed that. Under the idiom to stand out, the example just briefly mentions that having red hair could be a mark of the devil.
Exactly. By the end of the document, the reader hasn't actually read a cohesive list of 10 historical facts.
So couldn't they just, put the historical facts in bold text so they pop out more?
No, because changing the font styling doesn't fix the underlying architecture.
Ah, okay.
Explicitly map the target vocabulary words directly to a numbered list of the promised 10 historical facts, fulfilling the reader's expectation.
How would that look on the actual slides?
Well, one way is to explicitly number the section headers. So instead of a slide titled Expression 4, to raise eyebrows, it should be boldly titled Reason 4, trusting your intuition.
Oh, I see.
And then underneath that historical hook, you introduce the idiom to raise eyebrows as the tool needed to discuss that fact.
That way you treat the history as the main course and the vocabulary as the side dish.
Exactly. It anchors the abstract idioms to a concrete narrative.
So let's assume they fix that structure. We still need to talk about tone.
Yes, the tonal shifts in this deck.
Because when you synthesize these practice sections, the contrast is wild. You have historical sentences featuring dark concepts like drowning, being burned at the stake, and making a shady pact with the devil.
Literal life or death scenarios.
Right. But then, right below that, the modern practice questions are about like a probation period at work or arriving unprepared for an interview.
It's quite a jump.
But could this jarring contrast be an intentional icebreaker?
Like humor relies on absurdity. Maybe asking someone to instantly pivot from surviving the plague to office dynamics is a deliberate strategy to get learners talking.
The rapid thematic shifts between fatalistic medieval history and mundane modern office scenarios create a jarring tonal dissonance that may confuse the reader.
So you don't think it's funny, you think it's confusing.
The weakness is that it breaks immersion and undermines the learner's ability to grasp the emotional weight of the vocabulary.
The register.
Exactly. If you jump instantly from destroying a life with a witch accusation to a colleague taking credit for a spreadsheet, you create tonal whiplash. The learner doesn't know if to hit reset is for high-stakes drama or casual banter.
I actually had this happen to me. When I was learning Spanish, I learned this super dramatic phrase about tragedy, and I used it at a bakery when they ran out of croissants.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the baker looked at me like someone had died. So, should the creator just delete all the modern office questions to keep the spooky tone?
No, because they still need to learn how to use scapegoat in a modern boardroom. Harmonize the historical theme with the modern practice applications by explicitly bridging the gap between the extreme origins and everyday equivalents.
How do they build that bridge?
One option is to add a transitional sentence, like, while a literal witch hunt is a thing of the past, we use the phrase watch like a hawk today in high-pressure environments.
That's great. It's like a cognitive palate cleanser.
Or they could tailor the modern questions to be slightly more dramatic, like asking the reader to role-play a scenario where they are falsely made a scapegoat for a ruined dinner party.
Oh, that keeps the stakes playful but elevated. I love that.
It maintains the immersion perfectly.
Okay, before we wrap up our critique points, it is time to pivot to our superbly said quiz to test our listeners on the 8 phrases we covered earlier.
Awesome. I'll read out the options. And remember, feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer before we reveal it.
Sounds good. Question 1. What is the best definition for the expression to hit reset? Option A. To completely wipe out a current situation and start fresh, as if pressing a button to erase what occurred. Option B. To suddenly confront a remarkably difficult technical problem requiring a massive overhaul. Or Option C. To forcefully demand an immediate sincere apology after an exceptionally hostile interaction.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
So, to hit reset.
The answer is Option A. To completely wipe out a current situation and start fresh, just like our example of needing to hit reset on a failing marketing strategy at work.
Exactly. All right, question 2. How is the phrase, to watch someone like a hawk, accurately defined? Option A. To physically threaten a highly vulnerable colleague during a remarkably stressful negotiation. Option B. To observe someone very closely and with intense suspicion, waiting carefully for them to make a mistake. Or Option C. To aggressively pursue an incredibly risky financial investment without conducting proper research.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
And to watch someone like a hawk?
It is Option B. To observe someone very closely and with intense suspicion, like when your boss is watching you like a hawk after you made an error.
Spot on. Question 3. If someone is made into a scapegoat, what exactly are they? Option A, a highly secretive strategy utilized by senior management to bypass strict safety rules. Option B, a significantly prolonged and intensely bitter argument between rival political groups. Or Option C, a specific person who is unfairly blamed for the problems of others to completely deflect the real causes.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
So what is a scapegoat?
That would be Option C, a specific person unfairly blamed for the problems of others, just like the newest team member being made the scapegoat for a failed project.
Perfect. Question 4. What does a person mean when they say an action will raise eyebrows? Option A, to cause surprise, suspicion, or deep disapproval, making people question what they are seeing. Option B, to violently disrupt an organized public gathering to forcefully draw attention to a cause. Or Option C, to deliberately exaggerate a minor personal achievement to easily secure a massive job promotion.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
And to raise eyebrows means?
Option A, to cause surprise, suspicion, or deep disapproval,
Like someone taking a 3-month vacation, suddenly raising eyebrows at the office.
Right? Halfway there. Question 5. Which of the following best describes a lose-lose situation? Option A, a completely unexpected financial disaster resulting from an irresponsible transaction. Option B, a highly difficult scenario where every possible outcome is bad and you end up worse off whatever you pick. Or option C, a thoroughly detailed and exceptionally complex investigation launched into severe internal corporate fraud.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
So a lose-lose situation is...
Option B, a highly difficult scenario where every possible outcome is bad. Like the catch-22 we discussed, where speaking up or staying quiet both lead to terrible results at work.
Yep. Question 6. In a social context, what occurs when someone manages to stand out? Option A, to purposefully isolate oneself from a supportive group during a stressful professional moment. Option B, to aggressively assert your personal opinions over others during a contentious corporate discussion. Or option C, to be noticeably different from everyone else in a specific way that draws attention, whether good or bad.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
To stand out.
That is option C, to be noticeably different from everyone else. Like how an excellent presentation can really stand out in a meeting.
Great. Question 7. What does it mean if you decide to keep something to yourself? Option A, to deliberately not share specific information or feelings, actively choosing to stay silent over speaking. Option B, to secretly gather highly confidential financial documentation from an employer for personal future gains. Or option C, to securely lock away immensely valuable corporate properties to perfectly protect them from outside risks.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
Keeping something to yourself means?
Option A, to deliberately not share specific information or feelings. As we said for the IELTS example, choosing to keep your political views to yourself.
And our final question, number 8. How is a descriptive phrase "to be doomed" used? Option A, to gently force an extremely exhausted colleague to permanently abandon their current corporate obligations. Option B, to be in a situation where failure or a terrible outcome is completely inevitable and impossible to escape. Or option C, to rapidly experience a massive drop in physical stamina right after finishing a highly demanding activity.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
To be doomed?
Option B, to be in a situation where failure is completely inevitable. Like a new business venture being doomed from the start without proper funding.
Fantastic. That wraps up the quiz portion. So let's quickly recap our 3 actionable takeaways for the creator of this material.
Sounds good.
First, reorganize the promotional material. Move the app trials and AI feedback to a dedicated appendix or a footer to respect the reader's cognitive load.
Right.
Second, structurally align the content to actually deliver the 10 promised items by explicitly numbering them.
Make the history the anchor.
Exactly. And third, smooth out that tonal whiplash by building transitional bridges between the dark medieval examples and the modern practice questions.
Because honestly, using historical true crime to teach idioms is a wildly creative angle.
It really is.
It proves educational materials don't have to be dry. It just needs that structural and tonal tightening to ensure the pedagogy actually matches the brilliant premise.
Absolutely. We would love to see how this evolves. So to the listener who submitted this, please implement these revisions and submit your updated deck back to the show for another critique in the future. We genuinely want to see where you take this. So the next time you're building a lesson plan, remember, if you promise your audience a haunted house, make sure you don't stall them at the front door with a tax form. Let them in, let them explore the dark, and they'll be far more likely to stick around until the end.